We're going to talk about budget 2024. First of all, we're going to do a session about budget. What is budget about? And then build from there. And so it's an accounting by the government. It says this much money we have, this much we can spend. And so, but it's very, very, very crucial difference between how we people budget ourselves, how companies budget, and how countries budget. And so when we budget, we think about what income we have, what expenses we have. We typically look to keep our income below our expenses. We have some borrowings for purchases of land or studies or something like that. That is separate, but we keep our income below our expenses. We have expenses and then we think about income, and then if there is a gap, we say, okay, where is that gap? Okay. When countries do it, they have wild freedom about having gaps. And so they can budget to have expense of 100, income of 75, and borrowing of 25 on a continuous long-term basis. It's very important to understand that. Very often when we individuals think about government budgets, we don't even think about what is the money coming in, what's the money going out. We definitely don't think about what is a big role of debt played here. And so countries are fiercely creditworthy. Countries have an infinitely long time horizon for their existence. Interest payment is part of the set of expenses that they account for, and very often they are funding for growth. And so it is not wrong for a country to have expense, income, and then a deficit funded by debt forever. And it's very important for individuals to understand that. I just didn't get it. Lots of the terms that go on here that we'll probably be discussing now, I simply had no clue of when I was a school student or an undergrad student. I was absolutely clueless. I did my post-graduation and then I learned these terms. Only when I started working and I was in charge of writing research reports, it was my job to get my head around these things is when I sat around to do. So a little bit of this is going to be academic. This particular video, we're not going to do anything related to 2024 budget as much as we're going to say, hey, what is this budget malarkey all about? Fine. So this. Receipts. What are the money we get in? We get non-tax receipts, revenue receipts, capital receipts. And very important, very important. Right? Non-tax receipts is not usually large. This is the giant large pot, typically, or it should be. This is all the public sector enterprises that the country owns, banks or national railways, whatever, share of profits, dividends that come from there. That is this. The government has a stake in several public sector enterprises. Some of them may incidentally make money also. In several contexts are loss making, and they are loss making for a reason. Right? So, but if they are profit making, share of the profits finds its way towards a country. And so the dividends and profits from whatever is redistributed from the public sector undertakings, they come back to the government, to the country. This is very important. Revenue receipts. Right? So by act of having run for this year, run this economy for this year, what is the fee we can levy on people? Effectively, tax. Right? So corporation tax, income tax, wealth tax, customs, GST, all of them. Right? So taxes come under two pots: direct taxes, indirect taxes. This is very, very, very important to understand. We will do a deeper dive into just taxation. Right? So corporation tax, income tax, GST. Right? Direct taxes is what we directly pay. Indirect taxes is what is collected through us, from us, through somebody. Right? So if I buy a packet of, if I get a service, if I take a bus, if I take a train, then by act of taking the journey, act of getting the service provided to me, there is a GST levied on the transaction, which the provider pays, but technically I am paying through the provider. That is indirect tax. Direct tax, I make money, I make salary, I pay. Company makes profit, it pays. So income tax and corporation tax are direct taxes. GST is an indirect tax. Right? Income tax and corporation tax, individuals get income, they pay income tax. Companies make profit, they make corporation tax. Very simple. Right? So this is very important to understand this. Our direct taxes are give or take half of our overall taxes. Right? So indirect taxes are the remaining half, obviously. And so it's very important to understand that direct taxes are the ones that come under which come corporation tax and income tax. And so within this, corporation tax and income tax are by and large equal. That means income tax paid by people is broadly only 1/4 of the total amount of tax collected by the country. So every time you hear somebody saying 2% of Indians is bearing the burden of this whole world, no, 2% of Indians is bearing the burden of 1/4 of taxes collected by the government. Why I'm saying taxes collected? Beyond taxes collected, governments have a ton of other ways of funding. So tax collection is not my expense. From expense to tax collection, there's a delta. Tax collection is direct and indirect. Indirect is corporation and income. So one tiny sliver is spent collected by income tax. Right? So that is one thing to keep in mind. Capital receipts, non-debt capital receipt, market loan, short term. This is all the borrowing that we talked about. The governments can have expense of 100, income of 75, and borrow 25. Very interesting. Where do countries borrow from? They issue treasury bills. US, Europe, everybody does this. The banks in India are mandated to have a part of their reserves invested in government securities. And so that eventually people are buying these. And so our deposits fund purchases of government securities. So in many ways, eventually people are funding the debt to the government. So the debt goes too high, it comes back to haunt us always. Right? Nice. So where does the money go? This is very important, very crucial. The category is very important. Right? This is called revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is keep the lights on spending. Capital expenditure is putting money for the next cycle. You want to do the parallel for a house. Go have a meal. You go on a drive. You pay. School fees gets confusing. You pay to buy groceries. You put fuel into your tank. All of these come here. Revenue expenditure. What am I spending to sustain myself for this year, this quarter, this month, this period? That is revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure. You buy a house. You spend money on it. You cannot think of the amount of money you spent on buying a house as expense for the year, because you're going to live in the house for probably 20 years. You're going to save on rent for probably 20 years. You're going to have that as an asset for yourself that you can resell. That is capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is an expense that gets spent and gets finished. Capital expenditure is an expense that gets spent and results in an asset. Something that you can hold on to and say, hey, I own this. And so investing into the future in any form, an expense unto that will come under here. Keeping the lights on for this year will come under here. Very important category. The categorization is very important. All of you who are doing your personal budgeting should also think about this. Right? Equipment, purchase of assets, all of that come here. Roadways, highways, all of that come here. Money spent for this year, salaries, grants, subsidies, all of them come here. And so this way of thinking about, hey, what is our money coming in? What is our money going out? That is super important. You should also look at pie charts and graphs that give this breakdown. Super important, super fun to see, to understand what our country's general pie is. Where does the money come from? Where does the money go to? And super important to understand all these distinctions. Know the difference between revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. No direct tax, indirect tax. No corporation tax, income tax. Think about tax receipts and non-tax receipts, capital receipts. All of these, that understanding of, okay, these are the things that are into the pie. That is super important. Right? Lovely. We're going to go into budget 2024 and focus on key highlights. There's a ton of stuff that budgets talk about. Right? Budgets have become policy instruments in India. Typically, in some countries, budgets are just announcement of statement of accounts, and policy announcement happen throughout the year. Right? India is trying to go there, where they're saying, look, an announcement of some policy need not happen once a year. The ministry is working. They want to invest in something. They can invest in August or September or December and make the announcement. All the allocations for all the projects need not be done in one shot. Budget is taking stock of where we sit, making the big allocation, and then have policy announcements throughout. That is one model. But budget is where the money pie gets decided. So very often, when some kind of overall big broad allocation happens during budget times, and so we also come to look forward to it, which sector is getting, which sector, who's getting the money, which state is getting the money, etc., etc., etc. And so there's a bunch of policy announcements for each thing, for telecom, housing, tourism, etc., 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 which you can find. Those of you who are interested should go through that. I'm not going to focus on that in this video. I'm going to think about, hey, maybe 3-4 things that are interesting, relevant, and crucial for us. For when I say us, they're either aspirants writing exams or individuals who pay taxes, and or both of them. Fine. So let's jump in. This tax slabs have been rejigged. So tax goes on slab basis. You pay a certain amount of taxes till some rate, and then some other rate, and then some other rate. You get an exemption. India has now what is called as a new tax regime, old tax regime. You can choose between the two, or you could have made a choice between the two. Again, ton of stuff to just read up on curiosity. The most important idea is that tax works on slabs. That is, if you have a tax payment of income of X lakhs, if you have some tax beyond X, if the tax rate is higher, it is higher for the amount beyond X, not for the whole amount. Very much similar to your electricity billing. Every now and then, countries rejig their slabs effectively to account for inflation. A salary of 4 lakhs per annum in 2010, 4 lakhs per annum in 2017, 4 lakhs per annum in 2024 are wildly different things. Therefore, the tax system should register that, should reflect that. That has happened this year. It had not happened that much for 2-3 years before. It has happened this year. Not a big deal. Effectively accounting for inflation. So there is a chunky saving for people who are earning more than 10-12 lakhs per annum here. And this is not extraordinarily high. This doesn't wanker move the needle. It is practically something that accounts for inflation. It accounts for the fact that 12 lakhs of last year, what you could do with it, and broadly 13 lakhs of this year, what you can do with it, are kind of the same. And so therefore it accounts for that. And so not a dramatic change and slightly overdue. To be very honest, individuals were more than mildly disappointed with it, because they were thinking, hey, we would get more of a tax break with the kind of tightening conditions that are all around us. The economy is not roaring, prices are going higher up. There's a little bit of a squeeze that middle class India is feeling now. Therefore, we all thought that, look, the government will be a little bit more liberal and say, hey, keep the money, do something for the economy, or at least have a slightly more relaxed life. This number is not reflective of that. This is interesting. So, short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains. And I didn't understand capital gains. So in many ways, I'm taking this opportunity to try and see if there are probably 120-year-old, 22-year-olds who are very interested in stuff like budget, but who are completely thrown off by the jargon, as I was for a long time, to de-jargonize this thing. Capital gains is you make an investment, you make profit out of that. That is capital gain. I buy something for 100 rupees and sell it for 120 rupees. 20 rupees is my capital gain. In maths, in arithmetic, this is what we call selling price minus cost price. Fine. So there is a trade element to it, there's a capital element to it. This capital gains is you buy and you sell. What you buy a house for 1 crore, you sell it for 1.2 crores, you have capital gains. You buy stock for 20 lakhs, you sell it for 24 lakhs, that's capital gains. Right? Long-term capital gains is capital gains you make after holding on for more than a year. Short-term capital gain, less than a year. Very simple. Right? So if you're trading very frequently in anything, typically we're referring to here stocks, trading very frequently, then you're a punter. Then short-term rates are higher, long-term rates are lower. Right? Both of these rates have been raised. This goes from 15 to 20, this goes from 10 to 12.5. And the government is saying more and more Indians are coming and interested in getting returns from stock market. I want a share of that pie. So the Indian stock market participation has skyrocketed in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Maybe COVID had a role to play. We were sitting at home doing nothing. We got some terminals and IDs. Companies came in, fintech investments came in. The setup became easier. KYC became eKYC, video KYC. All of these played a role. Indian equity market participation, individuals by small investors, has increased. And so the government wants to say, oh, so you learned this trick, give me a share of the pie. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to be aware of the fact that you make capital gains, that it can also be considered as income. And so this is increased. And this is a hit for Indian households, because Indian households have now come to understand that using their wealth, they can generate income apart from FDs by participating in the stock market. It seems foolproof enough. It is not. It is not. It seems a way of making good money, good returns. Therefore, several Indian families are participating in that. And now the government says, oh, tum paise bana raho, mere ko thode de do. Right? So it's a very simple idea of dipping the hand in and taking more money. Individually, for me, personally, I think that structure, this probably was a wrong moment in time for the government to pull it off. It was probably the incorrect point for our economy for the government to try this. But I feel like these could be higher, the level where they are now. Tell you why. We keep hearing, I'm sure some of you might have heard this statement, that Warren Buffett, the great investor, pays lesser taxes than his secretary as a percentage of income, not lesser taxes. And so very often the wealthy, the really wealthy among us, the people who move government projects, the names we have heard of as industrialists and entrepreneurs and giant success stories, they have mechanisms to make their pay to be part of equity and stock options, stock returns. All of these, the CEO bonuses are all structured to reflect the equity market world. Right? So sometimes I get annoyed that this extra bonus that a CEO takes home gets taxed at 15%, 18%. I find it to be anomalous. It shouldn't be like that. And so if you all think of long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains as, hey, this is what you make in the stock market. A big part of this is also the returns people get by reframing their annual salary as equity payouts. Several people do it effortlessly. The richer they are, the easier they do it. And that is probably an issue that probably needs addressing. A giant stock payout given to a CEO running into 150 crores is probably something that can be accounted for as a capital gain. He moved the share price from here to there. Therefore, he's allotted this, and all of that. That's an issue. But in as much as this comes from income generated by middle-class Indians who have taken time out of their schedule to have a side hustle in the stock market, who are learning to participate in this, which we are encouraging, which we are saying clearly it's a good thing for the economy, who are now participating in the broader economic upswing by having exposure to equities other than just FDs, where the government is dipping its hand in and saying, look, lies, all good, give me the money, give me some part of the money. And so it's a squeeze to the middle class, which is why this has not gone down well at all among Indians, because this is the government saying, look, if somebody is making money, I want a little bit more of that. Right? That's how it looks like. So in that sense, this economy has made us feel like from all directions, the government is saying, you're making some money somewhere, give me something, a little higher share of that than I used to take. Throughout, in all elements. Tax slabs, they've not moved much. Capital gains, they're dipping in. So everywhere the government is saying, look, give me some money, give me some money. We're getting that feeling, and this is probably the biggest driver to that feeling. Long term, I think capital gains being taxed substantially lower than income is a way of rich people to restructure their income as capital gains and get away with it. It's happened in the West. It's probably happening everywhere in the world. It's probably something that moves like this can address. It should happen over an 8-year, 10-year horizon, gently, with super communication, ultra transparency, with relief for small amounts. All of those things, none of which has our government has really thought about. Our government is saying, you're making money, give me a higher share. Student loans, straightforward. This 1 crore youth to get a stipend from working in companies doing this. This is one of those seemingly sound giant number backed by giant budget good things for youngsters of India, which is means nothing. And this is all utter nonsense. And skill development reserve, stipend internship thing, this is going to find its way to somebody who's an intermediary who's going to take a share of this 1 crore into 5,000 in some form. And so all of these mechanisms are good on paper, are absurd when it comes to implementation. And I run a small company. If somebody said you can pay 5,000 per month stipend to interns and get it reimbursed by the government, and say, look, 5,000 may I can't get a great resource. If I really need interns, I'll find them. And if I find a resource intern for 20,000 and 5,000 of that is borne by the government, not a big deal. What value I can extract out of the intern is going to be based on my time and management bandwidth invested with interns. Whatever management bandwidth I invest with interns and whatever the savings I have for this 5,000 will just disappear in the paperwork I have to file to claim that 5,000 back. If it is optional, I'm not taking it. I'll recruit 3 interns. It will save me 15,000. I'm like, then the government will say, look, I'm mandating that you use this. In which case, there will be agencies that prop up which manage internships. So technically, our company will be running these interns. Somebody will be getting paid. The company will file the reimbursement claim. We'll pay the money. We'll get back the money. But look, I don't want the hassle. We'll give projects that they can complete, give a completion certificate. It becomes on one whole non-work work that gets created. At least that is my view of this. One of those beautiful, on paper sounding good projects, which is going to amount to a whole lot of nonsense paperwork for companies and individuals, and off the top skimming money for a bunch of intermediaries. There are intermediaries in our country who know brilliantly to work government machinery. Their job it is, they've defined themselves as in-between people who can process claims, who can do this. A chunk of this is going to go there. Companies are going to say, no income, no loss, no expense, buffer me from this policy. जो भी government को handle करना है, तुम handle कर लो. जो भी पैसा आ रहा है, तुम रख लो. Let's carry on with life. And it's one of those policies that's going to become like that. And it's a beautiful way for 5,000 crores to find its way into the economy to participants who are thoroughly undeserving of it, just for the joy of not bothering the rest of us who are functioning meaningfully in the economy with paperwork. Fine, so our government does a ton of this. Several governments do it. Our government does a ton of it. I've also heard that this is going to come from CSR budgets, which should be an even bigger pain. Not even the money that the government is handing out. The money that government is saying, you can show it like this. And so it's nothing. It's just take from one pot, put it into another pot, call it a scheme. Industrial parks are being commissioned. Again, proof of the pudding is the eating. If it comes and becomes meaningful, they could drive growth. We'll wait to see this. 2 states have got really good projects, Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. I'm not going to dive deeper into this because there's a very clear reason why these 2 states have got it. It's not a gap in a highway or an infrastructural development deficit. Anything. It's some other calculation that has gone into rewarding these 2 states or participants of these 2 states. Right? It was coming. It was obvious. It has now happened. And so I don't know. I hope they meaningfully use it. I hope the people get to enjoy it. I hope there is no loss in this. But this is payback. Travel and tourism. This has been interesting. Tourism spends have been low in India. I'm really hoping this comes in because Indians are getting conditioned to travel. Indians are getting wealthier. There's more disposable income that is spent on experience. The number 1 avenue for experience is travel, and then experiences from there on. And so it is going to be massive over the next few years. Our basic travel and tourism industry infrastructure is not sufficiently strong. And the resorts can be beautiful, but if it's a pain getting there, they won't get filled. If your taxi unions and railway porters are all making the tourists miserable, then no matter how much natural beauty is there and how much resort comfort is there, tourism won't take off. And so your infrastructure corridors, your mechanisms of getting people to the places they want to go, keeping them simple, they need giant investments. One big chunk is planned, one big chunk is going towards Orissa, which I hope comes to something. I think there is a giant gap in India as far as tourism as an industry is concerned. Lovely, beautiful places to see in our country, and we pay a lot of money to see similar places elsewhere in the world. I think elsewhere in the world, the places are more beautiful, excellent, well maintained, yes, but value proposition of Indian places are nice, and it takes you X amount to enjoy the Swiss Alps. You can pay 0.1x and enjoy something which is kind of 60% there. And for a great many of us, that's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant deal. And that's where we start. We get on the journey and then we go further, higher and higher along that journey. But right now, even that is not there. The prices are low, but the offering is not at all compelling. So if in tourism infrastructure spending can fix that, I'm hoping that this comes to something. Again, nothing happening in railways, nothing at all. There is another set of simple changes in real estate systems. I went through this. There is no part of this that is anything meaningful, and so there's no boost to real estate sector or investment coming in any form. Just changing one thing, label, checking this label, putting it here, checking this label, putting it here, putting one coin from this pot to another, one coin from that pot to this, calling it tweaks, and all nonsense. Nothing happening here. One thing on real estate indexation benefits, a very interesting thing. And so you make real estate purchases and you sell them and you make money, you have to pay capital gains tax. Very interesting. I'm going to go shift to whiteboard and marker for this. Suppose you buy a house. Again, many of you may know this, some may not. So I'm going to draw a diagram. And so suppose you buy a house. Say you bought a house in 2014. Right? Let's say notionally you bought it for 1 crore. You're rich. You're able to buy something for 1 crore in 2014. You bought it. Nice. And you're selling it in 2024. You made a killer sale on this. You pay in 2024. You get something like 3 crores. Right? So this is the framework for this. Right? So capital gains taxation used to work in India by saying you bought something for 1 crore, you're selling it for 3 crores, you made a bomb of money in this, good for you, let me get a share of this. And that's how governments usually operate. But in our government, used to say, hey, you bought something, but typically you make an investment. I want you to make an investment in housing. I'm facilitating it. I'm creating scenarios where it is easier and easier and easier for you to be spending money on real estate. So I want you to do this. It builds social capital. So I'm incentivizing this. So I cannot say all of this is built in. I'm going to index what you have purchased and say what you have purchased should have gone to this amount by 2024. So, hey, maybe notionally that amount is 2 crores. Right? Nice. So, our government used to say, you still have to pay me capital gains. I'm not letting you go away, but hey, you can pay me capital gains tax for, you should be paying capital gains tax for this amount. Right? You buy property, it gets indexed at a level. There's an indexation chart you can find. You put real estate index, you will find it. Get indexed to this. It says what the government is saying, if you bought something for 1 crore in 2014, it is automatically now today worth 2 crore by 2024. Whatever you sold for beyond this, give me a cut of it. Now, this system, what the government is saying is, look, the indexation era is done. You'll have to pay me for this capital gain. But not wholly, the government is not being cruel. He's saying, hey, you can pay me 12.5% of this. But remember, I used to originally charge 20% of this. And so, interesting shift. Once again, it's very typical of our ministry that this shift is more notional than real. It is very much something that is taken from one pot and put it to another pot. Our government is parlaying this as a relief by reducing the burden. And investors and small purchasers are getting peeved by saying you've taken away big indexation benefit. I did the numbers in several scenarios. The difference is not significant. 20% of this delta or 12.5% of this, they are not wildly away. In typical scenarios, if you have a real estate bull run where prices double in 3 years, then definitely this will be higher. Right? So if it is very modest, then this will be okay. Forget that last statement. I don't know which will be higher, but if there is a dramatically different movement in real estate prices, then one or the other will be significantly better. But otherwise, they're more or less the same. Another of those policies which don't have a material impact on this, but you put this on. It does feel like a squeeze. The middle class used to think that, look, I'm not paying for the whole thing, I'm paying for this. That is nice. The government is saying no indexation benefit. तुमने खरीदा, तुमने बेचा, जो original price है वही price है. No, none of this adjusted 2024 price business. And so it feels again like a squeeze. And so this particular budget has been not greatly received. People are not happy with it because it feels like we're living in times where our cost of living is higher, where prospects don't seem phenomenal for everybody. Seems like a slightly iffy moment. I'm not in a crisis, not a recession, not pain point. India is still growing. Several sectors are doing well. Our growth rate headline numbers is fine. But people are feeling this squeeze. There's a fear of a job loss without a commensurate replacement opportunity. There's a fear that my wage inflation, wage growth won't be great. There's this feeling that things are getting pricier. In that moment, where we're all feeling that this benevolent government structure on top of us will say, hey, lagta hai ki thoda mushkil hai, I'll ease things out for you a little bit. Government has chosen this moment and this moment also to say, tum idhar bhi paisa bana raho, 10% mujhe de do. So that feeling is there, and it's one of those things that are there. Hopefully, some of these policies, first of all, it's very important to understand these policies and know what are the impacts. Great many of the policies that have been announced in terms of capital gains or this, they are not cripplingly negative. They're definitely not in the category of easing the burden for the average citizen. We'll get over it. But this is a series of small increments, nothing dramatic. There's a disappointment that nothing dramatic did come about. But otherwise, the small increments are not cripplingly bad. Wonderful, folks. Have fun. We're probably looking to do a couple of more videos on the budget, on the how do we understand this idea of budget rather than what happened in 2024. Hopefully, we'll do that as well. If you have any specific questions, queries, do send them to us. We've always been not commentary people, but kind of not teachers. So if there's an issue with the funda, and hey, why is this being perceived as negative? What is really the meaning of indexation? What is it? Why do we need to have capital gains tax? Then please put them. We will try to answer them if we know it, of course, or if we can do the research, we'll try to answer. Otherwise, we'll say way beyond our pay grade. Right? Best wishes.